Hello, and welcome to the Feeling Good podcast, where you can learn powerful techniques to change the way you feel. I am your host, Dr. Rhonda Borowski, and joining me here in the Murrieta studio is Dr. David Burns. Dr. Burns is a pioneer in the development of cognitive behavioral therapy and the creator of the new team therapy. He is the author of Feeling Good, which has sold over 5 million copies in the United States and has been translated into over 30 languages. His latest book, Feeling Great, contains powerful new techniques that make rapid recovery possible for many people struggling with depression and anxiety. Dr. Burns is currently an emeritus adjunct professor of clinical psychiatry at Stanford University School of Medicine. You kind of sound like Daffy Duck there.
Yeah. Well, I'm Daffy.
Yeah. Hi, David, and welcome everyone to episode 239. Today we have another special guest, Dawn O'Malley, and she is a licensed therapist in private practice in Westminster, Maryland. Running groups is her favorite thing to do, and her all-time favorite group is that she offers her patients 11 weeks to self-esteem following David's book, 10 Days to Self-Esteem. So welcome, Dawn.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's our pleasure.
Dawn, I'm so excited to have you on the show. I can remember when I was thinking of writing 10 Days to Self-Esteem, some kind of a helpful thing at a fairly simple level. We used it in my hospital in Philadelphia because we had an inner city hospital, and about a quarter of our patients couldn't read or write. And so I want to write something very simple and accessible. And I once had the fantasy that these 10 Days to Self-Esteem groups could almost be run by lay people, kind of like Alcoholics Anonymous. But then when I published the book, just kind of for legal protection purposes, I suggested it would be run by mental health professionals. And I'm just so excited that you've been running these groups, and I'd just love to hear what your experience has been like and pass this on, because I think the 10 Days to Self-Esteem book it has a lot of potential for the general public and for therapists who might want to run structured groups. There's a leader's manual, and there's a manual for people in the groups as well. So tell us all about what you've been up to.
Well, it kind of all started when I came to a conference back in 2002. And I was perusing the books that were available for purchase, and I picked up the 10 Days to Self-Esteem book, and I picked up the Leader's Manual as well. And I looked at it, and I thought, well, this looks pretty interesting. Do I think I can do this? And it was kind of like the little engine that could. And I thought, I think I can do this. And the very first time that I did it, it was amazing.
Wow.
The scores, the patients, the improvement that I saw, the qualitative improvement, it was just phenomenal. And that's really kind of how I got started. And I actually got hooked pretty easily and pretty quickly, seeing the feedback from people and what was happening.
So, Dawn, you've been running these groups since 2002?
2002, yes.
Nice.
I probably run about 3 or 4 groups a year.
Nice.
Through my practice.
Well, before we started this podcast, you sent me and David one of the endorsements that you've gotten from one of your patients. So I thought it would be fun to read it so people could get a flavor of what it's like to be in your group.
Well, if you're going to be in a group with me, you're going to be in for a real experience, because it's going to be a multimedia kind of experience. I use props, I use video or YouTube, I use posters, I use my easel pad, and it's a very diverse experience.
Fun. Why don't I read this? You said this is from somebody named Julie, and she wrote, 10 weeks ago, I felt like that pilot who sets off on his destination with the end in mind, although I had no idea how or if I'd ever make it. Well, I'm nearly at the end of this particular journey, and I have, in fact, discovered that that I have made it, not without moments of turbulence, yet at the same time I descended back down to real life with a more in-depth knowledge about myself than I'd ever imagined. Because I worked so hard to complete all the homework in the book and took the time to learn about myself, I have now paved the way for a future that had, for most of my life, seemed so uncertain. But now that I have all these tools in my possession, my life seems more focused and clear. I have bared my soul in just 10 steps and turned an impersonal, just another book on the shelf into a book just for me. Within the pages, my negativity and dysfunctional thoughts fought it out with reason and newfound wow moments from a great writer who encouraged me to challenge my thoughts and write them down. This is now my Bible of future mental health survival, and I will carry it into the future rather than shelving it away amongst the masses of the past. That's a pretty great endorsement.
That's awesome.
It is awesome, and that's the experience that people have doing this program, which is why I do it over and over and over again. And it really is one of my very favorite things to do. So some more feedback I can give you from people that have done it.
Sure.
One person said, excellent program. At this point in my life, this probably saved me from being in an emotional critical situation and from being hospitalized.
That's
learned,
great.
I know. Another one said, I learned that my thoughts are basically groundless and distorted. And that's the thing, distorted thinking is not truth-based thinking. And once people go through this program, it's like the scales are lifted from their eyes and they can really begin to see reality in a very different way.
Just as an aside, while you're going through those wonderful comments, what's the age range of your groups?
I would say that most of the people that do my program are 30 and above.
Mm-hmm. And how many in each group?
My groups tend to be small. They're 10 or less.
Yeah. Cool.
And they run about an hour and a half, although sometimes I do go over, especially if we're really getting into something. It's kind of hard to turn it off sometimes.
That's true.
And I remember, Dr. Burns, telling you at one conference that my groups were an hour and a half long, and you said, that's not long enough. They need to be at least 3 hours.
Yeah.
And they really could be, although I don't know that I could last for 3 hours because it's a lot going on in the room.
At our hospital in Philadelphia, we initially treated everybody with 10 days of self-esteem groups.
Really?
And they were run by people in the neighborhood who were trained, supervised by a psychologist. And we treated people all day, every day, 7 days a week with groups. So if they got into the program, they'd be getting 8 or 10 hours a day.
Oh my gosh!
Of therapy.
Wow.
And these were super severe people, homeless people and, gang members and people who were hallucinating when they were admitted. And most of our patients were just dramatically improved within 3 days. And it was a very inexpensive program to run. And so we got tons of referrals in our Department of Psychiatry. I started the Department of Psychiatry as a volunteer activity for our department at Penn. This was not the Penn Hospital, but a neighborhood hospital 6 blocks away. And our Department of Psychiatry went from 2 to 200 employees in 1 year.
Oh my gosh.
The programs got really popular. Tell us more about the fabulous work you've been doing and the endorsements you've got there.
I find that it's so much more effective teaching these skills in a group format than one-on-one.
Yeah.
And honestly, if I gave this book to my patients and I said, here's a book I want you to go read and tell me how it goes, most of them, wouldn't do it to its completion.
Right.
People get sidetracked and they're busy. And so I really feel very strongly that it's the week-to-week group process that keeps people on track, that helps people get through the workbook. And it's very deliberate and intentional learning that's going on. each and every week. So that's really what helps people be successful with this. And really
you have fun with it too.
Oh, I have a lot of fun with this. I'm kind of like Miss Frizzle from the Magic Schoolbus.
Yeah, cool.
You're familiar with that?
No, I'm not, but it sounds great.
You have to look up Miss Frizzle. So she's very animated, and she's a teacher. There were a whole series of books out called the Magic Schoolbus that you're going to have to check out. But she's very enthusiastic, and she's very excited, and that's kind of how I am. That's what I bring. I bring my whole self to every group that I do, and I get very excited for people, and they know it, and they will, they feel my enthusiasm and my commitment for them, and belief that they can do this. Sometimes people are very demoralized and don't feel like they can, be successful with this, but yeah, it is contagious.
Yes, I know what you mean. I have that same contagion. Sometimes I have to tune it down a little bit and be empathic. Too much optimism, in my experience, can sometimes turn patients off because what I'm saying seems so unbelievable to them. But I find that, if I tone it down a little bit and add warmth and compassion, allow the tears to flow, they really do appreciate the hope and the enthusiasm, greatly. I just had a thought that I don't want to forget, and then I'll turn it back over to you because I want you to do most of the talking. But I don't know if you're aware of this, but I'm working on an app with 3 or 4 younger colleagues, and we're working really hard on it, and we're very excited about it. It'll be kind of like 10 days to self-esteem on steroids.
Oh, my.
And it'll be a lot more powerful than that, potentially. Well, they have to do the exercises, while they're taking the app. There's exercises every minute or two. But it has all the new techniques and everything. But we've been feeling strongly that we need some kind of social connection for the people above and beyond just taking this app. And it might be that you'd want to experiment, in collaboration with us at some point. We're still beta testing and developing the prototype, which is a massive amount of work. But to try some groups based on the Feeling Great app as well, it would be very similar to working with the 10 Days to Self-Esteem. But there's more technology, and there's a lot of it just way beyond what's in the 10 Days to Self-Esteem group. That itself is overwhelming for people and very new and exciting for people, as you know. But there's even all the new positive reframing stuff, and
yes,
but it would be I think just amplify it greatly to have groups, and then you might be able to have much larger groups too. If you had that interest. I'm just mentioning this, but we're very aware of our strong desire to have a collaboration with therapists or folks who are trained or something, where people could maybe practice the techniques in groups and connect with other people like what you're doing. And I don't want to put my book 10 Days to Self-Esteem out of business either.
I really hope you don't, because I don't know what I'm going to do if you do.
Yeah, well, if you'll have more groups.
Hey, Dawn,
File those.
You said that the group is more effective than one-on-one. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
I much prefer to teach these skills in a group situation than one-on-one. I think the group process is so powerful and so impactful for so many reasons for people. And,
what are some of those reasons?
The whole experience of depression and anxiety can be so isolating to begin with. And when people come together, it's like, I'm not the only one. And that is powerful for people to know that, they're not going crazy and it's not just them. It's huge. It really is.
So in a sense, you're creating community.
Yeah.
You do create a community. And it starts off where people don't have a lot to say. And then by the second or third group, they're very chatty and There's these pre and post groups going on out in the waiting room and in the parking lot. And then as we're approaching, the end of the group, I'll start to bring it up. Guys, we've only got 1 more week or 2 more weeks. And people are often very sad because, it's ending and it feels good to feel good. And they feel like people understand and there's no judgment and they don't want to see it end. So actually, this group has given birth to a lot of other groups that have continued.
Are you using the testing
Yes.
forms that David created before and after every group?
Absolutely. Well, I use the depression checklist and the anxiety inventory and the Burns relationship satisfaction scores. And I collect those scores every week. And what I do at the end of my program is I will actually give each of the patients a report card. It kind of looks like this. I don't know if you guys can see this.
Oh, yeah. Cool. Right.
I
like that.
So you collate the data from the whole 10 weeks and then you give it to them?
Yes. So I put together what I call a report card. And I frame this not as group therapy, but as a course or a class. And that really helps to destigmatize it too, because some people don't have very good ideas about group therapy and, what that might look like. So to try to make it more appealing, I refer to it as a class. And it really is because there's a lot of learning going on. There's homework every week. And so it's structured in that way.
If you were, again, I don't want to keep changing the topic, but you're putting a lot of ideas in my head. And, if you at some point, we're going to do a beta test coming up of the app. We do them, every now and then. The feedback informs us and modifies our thinking radically. But, you're doing all this really creative stuff to make it multimedia and everything like. And if you wanted to, do a beta test on the app at some point, then you might want to shoot the breeze with us on a Zoom about ways of adding fun and multimedia to the app experience as well, because you've got to have that kind of mind on that wavelength. And then also, because you're calling it a class, then you could, if you had the interest, and you probably have your plate full right now, which is fine too, but I'm just thinking out loud, you and other therapists could then be running classes for app users to take consecutively when they're working with the app. And then by calling it a class, it might also, you could have a disclaimer which reduced or eliminated liability, therapist, for malpractice or something like that. That people would state that they're taking a class and have a chance to practice, but this should not be confused with, with psychiatric, with psychotherapy or actual treatment. Does that make sense to you, Rhonda, too, with your forensic background?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But let's get back to what you're doing. I'm sorry, you just getting me all inspired, Dawn.
Hey, Dawn, you said you have people do homework, and we just did a podcast on how hard it is to get our patients to do homework. So talk to us about the homework component of your class.
I really think that it starts on the front end when I do the pre-admission screenings for this group. I do use your materials, Dr. Burns. I use the participant agreement. I use the administrative checklist. I decided early on I was not going to try to reinvent the wheel, and that there had to be a reason why you set it up the way you did. So I think it's critical to get the commitment on the front end from patients. They really have to be all in. And we can assess that on the front end when we go through that pre-admission process. We talk about how important it is.
Yeah. Is that the concept of self-help memo that you're referring to? Or what is the participant? Because it's been a long time since I wrote this stuff. It was in an earlier century, actually.
Oh, my gosh. So yes, you actually did create a participant agreement, and it says, and there's little check boxes that say, I agree that I will do the homework and that I will participate in the program. And I've modified it a little bit, especially
Sure, of course.
especially now that we're doing it over Zoom. I've had to incorporate more things, but I want to be sure that it's going to be a good group experience for everyone. So I'm very protective about my process, and I feel like that's really part of my job. So
in my Tuesday training group at Stanford, which is now virtual, and then we have a Wednesday group that Rhonda is heading up. In the Tuesday group, I don't know how you're handling it, Rhonda, but we make people accountable to come. It's free for therapists, but they have to. If they don't come to 3 out of 4, on average, they're taken out of the group, and they also have to do homework. Lately, we've made them accountable, and then they have to sign a thing before they can get into each Tuesday session when they're getting onto the Zoom that they attest that they've done the required homework, and that's actually boosted the morale of the group. And surprisingly, we didn't start doing this until, would you say, maybe a year ago, Rhonda?
Right. Yes.
And since then, our group has gained a lot of cohesion, and the morale has been great.
Yes.
Well, it's going to be pretty obvious when you're in a very small group like I run if you haven't done your homework.
Yeah.
And there is an accountability to the group.
Yeah.
And most of all, they're accountable to themselves. And so I really do stress that on the front end, that it's just so important.
Do you have them pay ahead of time, or do they pay on a week by week, and then if they drop out, then you lose income? Or
so what I do, again, keeping with how you set up the process, I do collect a $50 deposit.
Wow.
I do.
That is fantastic.
I've done it since the beginning of time.
Wow. Bless your heart.
And, I think, some people may be a little taken aback by that, but I will tell them, I don't want your $50. What I really want is for you to come one time and do your homework.
Wow.
But they do. They'll give me their $50. And the very first week when we meet, we'll do a cost-benefit analysis on doing your homework. And one of the advantages of doing your homework is, guess what? You're going to get your $50 back.
Oh, great.
So, yes. That's how I handle that. And I've had some people who have, at the end of the program, have told me I deserve more than $50 back because I work so hard. So, yeah.
Well, actually, that was also one of my ideas, to set it up like that.
I know it was.
And we're thinking of doing that for the app, and so I'm glad that we're not settled in on that, but we could have all of that automated, and you can put up. I thought of saying that we have an investment program associated with the app, and we can guarantee that you'll make money on your investment, and you can invest any amount of money you want. And then it all goes into this pot, and you get points for coming on time, or for sticking with the app, doing the interactive exercises within the app, and that we hope you'll drop out, because then that money will be available to grow the pot of gold for the other people. And at the end, you'll get an amount back based on how many points you've accumulated.
Oh, my God.
And I'm just so pleased that you took some of these ideas seriously, because I think most people didn't do a lot of the things I suggested because they thought I was a kook, and I am a kook, but still some of the ideas are good ones.
They were really good ones, and I've consistently done it. And I think it gives patients some skin in the game, so to speak.
Yeah.
Even though it's only $50. I mean, we talk about it, and we talk about what are you going to do with your $50 when you get it back? And, what can you do for yourself to celebrate that you did this?
Cool.
So that $50 is kind of a big deal. And
wow.
It's just
now, are your people, what socioeconomic bracket do they come from?
I have a fair amount of people of all, ranges, but, some of them are on Medicaid.
Yeah.
And some of them, pay out of pocket. It's a wide range.
Yeah. But the $50 is the same to all of them?
It's the same for everybody.
Yeah, but I mean, it means something, even if they have a lot of money versus if they have a little money.
You would be surprised. Oh, yes. As I said, some people have told me I deserve more back than that $50.
Yeah, that's so neat to hear. Do you ever get any reimbursement for Medicaid or insurance or anything, or is it just all pretty much out of pocket?
Now, I do bill insurance, and it's group therapy. And I will tell you, the insurance companies actually love it.
Oh, they do?
They do, because, I provide really good notes that I've created, and it has their scores each week.
Oh, yeah.
And, this is one of the few things we can measure.
Yeah.
It's tangible and concrete, and the insurance companies love to see progress.
That's what happened in Philadelphia. We kept sending reports. Ours was an alternative to inpatient. At first, it was like a residential 10 days to self-esteem program, but it was like doing it every day rather than once a week. And then we would just send these reports of the changes in the depression score to all this managed care. I mean, we were even managed care before managed care. And so they started sending us all these patients to us because we charged at the time, it was a 10-day, kind of like quasi-hospitalization, but we charged the insurance companies $1,600 for the entire 10 days. And that included the room, the board, medicines, the treatment.
Wow.
And then we were competing with the University of Pennsylvania Hospital, and they charged like $3,000 a day.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
And I was also supervising the residents, and they said that when patients came in depressed, their goal was to send them out equally depressed but not actively suicidal 4 weeks later.
God.
And then when they came to our program, they were generally, symptom-free in 3 days. And it was dirt cheap. So that's how we started getting all of these tremendous numbers of referrals, why our thing grew so fast, because the insurance companies liked saying that they weren't, it cost, if they sent someone with severe major depression to Presby, which is where I was, versus Penn, for the same exact patient, if they sent to us, it only cost them 8% as much. As what, like it cost them $25,000 if they referred them to Penn, and it would be like $1,600 if they referred them to us. So I love what you're hearing. Tell us some more of this cool stuff.
Yeah, Don, for people who don't know what you do in each of the 10 weeks, can you give us a little summary of it?
Sure.
What does the program consist of? It's been so long since I wrote it, I don't even remember.
Oh, my God. So, as I said, we start out with the pre-admission process.
Yeah.
I will meet with people, and I'll go through the checklists and make sure they understand, even if we're billing insurance, if you drop out prematurely, we're going to bill you at the rate that we would have gotten reimbursed.
Good for you.
And we do hold people to it. And again, it's not even that I want to do that. I want people to be committed.
Yeah, right.
What they say they're going to do.
Money talks.
Well, it does. And, it's more skin in the game.
Yep.
So, we kick it off with, we go through this every week per your workbook. But, the first week, the price of happiness was where, we're talking about, what did they learn from the introduction and what things really jumped out. And I will tell you, some people are a little taken aback when you say you must fill out those checklists in big bold letters. They're like, he's telling us what to do. And I said, well, he tells the therapist what to do too in the workbook. So it's not just you. So
you can say he's very controlling and obsessive, but we'll forgive him for that.
I love that checklist that you have in the first step, where it really kind of speaks to where the resistance might come from. That checklist, like who is this guy and what makes him such an expert, or
what's on the checklist? I don't even remember. I don't even have a copy of the book around here.
Oh, wow. I'm shocked. This is such a good book. So the things that you have on your checklists are, let me get to it. Hang on.
You're talking about the depression and anxiety inventories?
No. Mm-mm. No, we're talking about, let me get to it. The 15 good reasons for not doing the self-help exercises
beautiful.
On page 31. And I'm so glad that you put that in the very beginning of the workbook, because these are all the things that might get in the way of someone really being able to take in all this good stuff if they're kind of stuck with these kinds of concerns. Mm-hmm. So we process that. We talk about all these things. And
to tell us what some of them are. This sounds fascinating.
I think the biggest one is I'm afraid of what might happen if I do change. My life may be miserable, but at least it's familiar.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Give us some more.
That's a big one. I think others are to blame for my problems. Why should I have to change?
That's a huge one, too. I see that often in people. Well, anybody can, but if someone has a diagnosis of borderline personality disorder, I think they're very strongly into that. Others are to blame. Do you have patients with that diagnosis as far as you know in your group?
I think they're very few and far between.
Oh, okay.
And sometimes when people begin to learn that it's about them and not other people, I've had some people actually decide that they don't want to do this.
Oh, yeah, right.
So, yeah,
exactly.
they self-select and they'll drop out.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Because that's a very familiar role to them.
I also found that patients with borderline personality disorder choke over the idea of having to be accountable and do homework.
Yes, they're not a fan.
Yep.
That's for sure.
This last one on the list, I believe I'm too seriously depressed to be helped by this sort of thing. Do you have a lot of people endorse that thought?
No. Fortunately, I really don't. That's few and far between that people will check that.
That's great.
What are some others that they check a lot?
They check, I don't trust Dr. Burns. Who is this guy? What makes him such an expert?
Yeah. I was telling Rhonda that I get after each Feeling Good podcast, which we do once a week, I get feedback, and it's usually very positive. But 2 weeks ago, someone sent me an email. I was talking about rapid recovery for people with OCD, and he just put in the feedback, the comments on YouTube, he just put "F you."
Nice. That's really nice. Another one that people frequently will check is, I'm not convinced that the exercises will make a difference in my life.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I will tell people, I'll validate that, and I'll say, well, you really don't know. You're really going out on a limb here, and you've never done this before. You're trusting me when I tell you it's going to be great, and you're going to feel so much better, but you haven't done this yet, so you really can't know for sure. And I'm okay with that. And I love a skeptic. I really do.
I do too.
And I will put that out there, because here's the thing. I know what's going to happen because I've done this so many times.
Yeah.
I already know what the end is going to look like. And when you do something, a couple hundred times, or not a couple hundred times, but I've done it with a couple hundred people at this point, you really begin, you know where it's going to go. If I do my job well, and I'm very intentional, and empathy is a big part of that too, but also engaging and keeping people accountable and minding the group process, it's going to be phenomenal. It is.
Well, if you've had a couple of hundred people or 300 people, which makes sense based on 4 groups a year, or maybe 8 or 10 people a group, and then there's 10 sessions per group, then you probably had 3,000 or 4,000 group therapy sessions or group classes with this 10 days to self-esteem.
I've never done the math that way, but I guess you're right.
Isn't that interesting?
That's very interesting. I've never thought of it that way, but I guess I have.
So Dawn, after the first group, when you're talking about the self-help assignments and you're setting up the culture of accountability, in the second group, you're talking to them about how you feel the way you think, right?
I love the second step, because that's when the awakening begins to happen. And I will tell people at the end of the first week, this was a cakewalk. Just wait till next week. That is when we are going to hit the ground running, and that is going to be the foundation for everything else that you learn. And so I get very excited for them. And when they come in, we talk about different examples of how this all works, why we can all experience the same thing but have different thoughts about it, and how we have to own our own thoughts and how our thoughts create our feelings. And, we go through the distorted checklists, and I'll actually do a survey. So who in the group has all or nothing thinking? And I'll say, raise your hand, and they'll raise their hand, and I'll go to the next one. And I'll say, you can keep your hands raised if you want to, because I already know that a lot of people have these distorted thinking types, and they never even knew that they did. You don't know what you don't know, but once you know, it's like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. And then we go through our first daily mood log together, talking about Tyrone being laid off from his job. And I'm actually able to show people on an easel pad how we can totally defeat 100% all of his negative thoughts, and how we can reduce those negative emotions to zero. And it's incredible what happens in that room. What people, they see it.
So Tyrone is an example of somebody in your book.
Yes.
And then do you also have people do their own personal work?
Well, yes. After that step, part of the homework is that's when they start doing their own daily mood logs. And we'll start reviewing those when they come in. Not just...
What were Tyrone's negative thoughts?
Tyrone's negative thoughts was, I'm a born loser. I'll never get another job. I'm letting my family down.
Okay.
And what happened with Tyrone was Tyrone lost his job in a company-wide layoff.
Oh, yeah.
And so I will emphasize to people that prepositional phrase in a company-wide layoff makes all the difference in the processing of what's happened. And so it's just emphasizing you have to be very specific. Who, what, when, where, why.
Cool.
In your description. So I will tell people, we're not going to go through every page and every step, but I'm going to pull out the things that are most important to you. And before you leave this office, you guys are going to understand this, because we're going to go through this together, and everybody's going to get this, that this is not above anybody's ability. Everybody can learn this, and they do.
When our group in Philadelphia was not a high educational group, although there were a few, but most were, living on the streets and very few resources in terms of money, not much education. And that was the easiest group to work with. They got it with no problems.
And they do. They get it. And it's like their eyes are opened.
Yeah.
It really is. And it just can alleviate so much pain and suffering for people.
Yeah.
And then the next week is titled, You Can Change the Way You Feel. How do you incorporate that in your group?
So that one, I actually love the charts on constructive and healthy anger versus destructive and unhealthy anger, and characteristics of healthy sadness and characteristics of depression. So many times in my groups, I've told people I would love to have a billboard on Route 140 in Westminster, Maryland, with that chart, the characteristics of healthy constructive anger and characteristics of unhealthy destructive anger, because if people really got this and they really made an effort to try to come to the other side, if you're not on, the healthy side, our lives could be so different.
Mm-hmm.
Our communities could be so different.
But life would be no fun then. I mean, if with our unhealthy anger, we can like shoot people and hate people and feel morally superior to people. Where
Well,
would life be without all of those good distortions?
I'm not sure that I can endorse that.
I'm with you.
Trying to promote peace and good mental health here.
Absolutely.
So we talk about that, and I'll ask people, which side of the column do you see yourself? And so they'll be sharing about that, and people will, put it out there. And then they really.
What did they say then?
Some people will say, "Yeah, I'm definitely on the unhealthy side," and other people will say, "Well, I've got some on each side."
Yeah.
But not all of them.
Yeah.
So I think they're kind of relieved, the people that find themselves in that spot.
Mm.
So
maybe we could put those charts in the show notes. I have them, and I could send them to you to put in the show notes.
Sure.
Yeah.
Be cool.
And here's the thing. You have provided a way to conceptualize what it looks like to have unhealthy versus healthy negative emotions.
Oh.
And people don't learn this. For many people, this is their first exposure to really thinking about, is there a healthy version of unhealthy emotions?
Yeah.
Or negative emotions, I should say.
Yeah.
So there's just so much rich content.
Thank you.
That you have provided that people, are learning for the first time. Many of them, because we don't get these lessons in emotional intelligence.
By the way, where do your patients get their books?
Amazon.
Okay. And do you know how much they pay for them?
I think they're $16.99.
Is that that's with like a little discount, Amazon discount or something?
I don't know, honestly.
I know when I wrote the book, I made an agreement with the publisher that people like yourself, if interested, could buy them wholesale from the publisher and get the bookstore price.
Oh.
You may not want or need to do that, but we found when at Presby, the hospital would buy them 250 at a time because we just had a huge patient flow, and then they just gave them for free to the patients. But it was cheaper than photocopying at the time.
Wow.
But that's not a bad price for people to pick them up on Amazon. That's a good way to do it. $16 is a good deal because it's a workbook and you can be testing yourself and doing the exercises. Keep talking. I'll shut up.
Okay, so then the week number 4 is how to break out of a bad mood. How does that week go?
That week is awesome too, because that's when we're introducing all the tools, the 15 ways. So I will tell people, we're building a toolkit. That's what we're doing here. And each week builds on the previous week. And in the 4th week is when we really start learning different ways to untwist negative thinking.
Mm.
So we practice the cost-benefit analysis together. We practice, examine the evidence. We'll go through each of these tools, and I'll ask people, which ones do you think, are more user-friendly for you? Which ones do you see that you could be trying? And so we discuss those in each of them. And I will tell people, of all the tools, which ones do you think might be more impactful? And oftentimes it boils down to 2 of them. And it's the double standard and the acceptance paradox.
Mm.
Those 2 are so incredibly powerful.
I have a quick question for you. It came up today working with the app. How do you teach the acceptance paradox? I always just taught when I'm doing therapy, I teach it by externalization of voices and role reversals.
Yes.
But do you have any particular way that you teach the double standard? I mean, the acceptance paradox?
Well, you've kind of helped us teach that with the content in the very next step, which is the acceptance, the 2 types of acceptance, the self-defense and the other type of acceptance paradox. There's a whole step dedicated to that.
Oh, is that number week 5 or something? Or
week 5. So they're getting a taste of it in week 4. And it's a bit of a reach for some people because they see it as maybe a contradiction in terms. You're telling me that you want me to feel better, or you're hoping I will, but you're telling me to accept my stuff. And some people have a bit of a hard time kind of figuring that out in their heads. So I'm really glad that you took it to the next level in the very next step. Which
in week 5.
Week 5, yes. And let me tell you about week 5. Week 5 is the mirror technique. And I have this beautiful mirror. I don't know if you guys can see this.
Oh, yeah.
Beautiful mirror. It's an antique mirror.
Oh, yeah. Oh, wow.
And if this mirror could talk, this is when the transformations are happening. This is when oftentimes the tears will come. This is when it's a bearing of the soul, so to speak, for so many people. And it's really hard to do. And I'm really glad that you didn't put that in the very beginning of the book, because there's no way that I could get people to do this early on. There has to be group trust. There has to be a comfort level to go there. And by then, they really are ready. By then, they understand that those distortions are exaggerations and that they can begin to take a look and really begin to accept some things that maybe they really do need to work on. Or maybe, they finally get it that beating themselves up is just causing them, heartache and misery and depression.
So tell us what you have people do with the mirror.
So I will have each person go around the room and talk into the mirror. So I can tell you there's a lot of resistance to doing this sometimes. Like people will pass the mirror and no, I don't really want to do. I'm like, well, everybody's going to get a turn. And so people will look above the mirror, or they'll look over it, or they'll try to turn it over. And I'm like, no, that's not how this works. We got to do this. We got to go there. And it's cathartic.
What do they do when they look in the mirror?
They're confronting some of their deepest, darkest negative thoughts.
So do they talk in the second person you, or the first person I?
What I do is I have them start with I. I am a failure. I am the worst mother on the planet. And then I'll ask them, are you done? Are you done beating yourself up? And if they say yes, then I'll say, now I want you to talk back to that and go into the you, personal pronoun. So they'll do that. Sometimes we do it. Before that, we'll do it. I'll pair people up in little groups and have them practice. But we have to do the mirror.
This is great what you're saying. This is fantastic.
We have to.
After they say in the mirror, I am a failure, and then if they say they're done beating themselves up, then would they speak in the second person you?
Yes, they talk back to that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's like a double standard type of thing.
It is. It really is. And sometimes the group will even chime in. If they get stuck or they're very emotional at that moment, the group support is just amazing what happens. It's incredible.
What happens?
People will begin to reach out, not literally, but, emotionally. You've told me that you have done all these things for your kids. How can you be the worst parent on the planet? They get that external validation. And
yeah, that happened in the workshop I was telling you about, Rhonda. When I was doing the live work, all the people in the workshop, since we were virtual, started typing into the chat, just like what you're saying, Dawn. And this woman was saying, "Oh, no one could accept me. I'm weird. I'm unlovable." And then people are saying, "We love you. This is fantastic. You're giving us a wonderful experience." And she could barely believe it at first, and so much of it came in. It was blowing her mind.
Yeah.
And the way you're setting this up is so fantastic and brilliant. I just love this, Dawn.
Thank you. It's the patients that are brilliant, really.
Yeah.
They work really hard.
Yeah.
They really do. And I will tell you, in the evaluations, sometimes, what did you like least about the program? The mirror.
Oh, wow.
Because it was so hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. But this mirror, it is the keeper of many, many groups.
And when they say the negative, do they use the second person or the first person? Do they say you're a failure or I'm a failure?
I'm a failure.
I'm a failure. Okay.
I want them to start with I, because that's what they're telling themselves on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And I don't want them to stay there.
Yeah.
And this is an opportunity to really see the truth in those thoughts is not there, that it's all lies.
You are one dynamic lady, Dawn.
Oh, well, thank you.
You must have an awful lot of fans from the people who've been through your groups.
Well, it's transformational. And I will tell people on the front end, you cannot take this program and not be affected by this. If you come to group and you do your reading and you do your homework, you're going to come out of this a different person.
Wow.
You cannot be the same person. It's just not even possible.
Dawn, sounds like it was such a powerful session. And now you're into session 6, which is getting down to root causes. Tell us what you do in session 6.
So kind of how I kick it off is I will tell people, this is the wellspring. This is where it's all coming from. All of these, these core beliefs, these self-defeating beliefs and attitudes, which are not negative thoughts, they are your beliefs. And you bring this everywhere you go. These are very portable. And this is what influences your beliefs about yourself and the world and what you say to yourself and how you conduct yourself, the decisions you make, the choices you make. It all comes from this.
So you have people identify what their common self-defeating beliefs are.
Yes, I will have them do the scale on page 154. And so we'll go through that. I'll do a little survey in the group. So who has the approval addiction? Who has the love addiction? And the hands are going up. And, it's kind of a nice way to do it because, again, I don't want people feeling like I'm the only one that has this problem. So we do this survey.
That's great.
And then I will also give some examples about, how people stay in relationships sometimes because, the fear of being alone, and all these things and how they really do influence major life decisions that we make. And so we'll go through all these and I'll give some examples. One of my examples that I give is about a teenager whose father I was seeing, who was horrified because she wanted to go to the high school prom. And this boy told her, if you go out into the woods with me and have sex with me, I'll take you to the prom. She was so desperate for approval because she wanted to go to the prom so badly. She did this. And unbeknownst to her, he was videotaping her.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes. Horrified. The family was just destroyed. But it goes back to what motivated her to do that. What was the need, to do that? So, it's really hard things to talk about sometimes, but this is at the root of all of it. This is where it's so important to understand what is driving you. Why are you doing the things that you do?
Yeah.
To really begin to process this, what are the advantages of believing this? What are the disadvantages? So we do the cost-benefit analysis. And then we talk about how can we, without giving it all up, because there's got to be some advantages or you wouldn't do it. And we don't want to give all that up. But how can we tone it down? How can we make it more user-friendly?
Yeah.
So we move to understanding that you don't have to give it all up, but is it really serving you? And these things that you've learned, or maybe these things that you've believed, or you were taught to believe, are those things really working for you?
So everybody revises their
Yes,
self-defeating belief.
they do. They really do.
That's awesome. That sounds like a really, really powerful week. Not that
It sounds like all the latest stuff, Rhonda.
Doesn't it, though?
It is. And I'll tell you, that's the secret sauce. What you come up with, the positive reframing, is like the secret sauce, big time.
Yeah.
Which is not in this. It's not in this book.
Exactly.
Not there. And I know that which is why I did an 18-week Feeling Great group.
Oh, wow. We'll have to have a second podcast.
I know, but I'll tell you.
By the way, you just sound like the greatest teacher on the face of the earth.
Oh, my gosh. Thank you so much.
You agree, Rhonda?
I totally agree. Your enthusiasm and the creativity that you implement these sessions, it sounds really, really fun and so profound.
Yeah, well, and you make it accessible and fun and interesting.
Well, I try to be very intentional. And I've done this so many times that I have a pretty high level of confidence. I know what I'm going to do, how I'm going to do it. And there are points where I'm, it's very serious sometimes. And other times we can lighten it up and we can laugh together. We can cry together. We can experience this and be on this journey together. Mm-hmm. And it really is. It's like taking people on a journey from start to finish. And I will tell you, when we get to step 7, we have hit the big O. That's really where I feel like we are by step 7, because that's when we're really talking about the ideas about self-esteem and self-worth. And can you have too much self-esteem? And, should you base it on, this, that, or the other? Or do I have to have the car? Do I have to have the job? Do I have to have, all these things to feel good about myself? And, I love how you, bring in kind of the Eastern philosophy to all this.
Yeah.
And that is a huge mind shift for people.
Yeah.
It's huge. And
do people struggle to accept that?
It's a whole different paradigm, really. Mm-hmm. It's a whole new way to think about all this. Mm-hmm. So, I think people want to go up that ladder that you've described at the end of this step from,
yeah, that's right. The different steps of self-esteem, and then you get to the top thing, you throw away your self-esteem.
Yeah, people don't go for that one so much.
They don't get that. That's too bad. Well, they go up part way. It's still good.
They go up the ladder. Let me tell you, I see people go up many rungs as they're going through this program. That is the hardest one to grasp, because you feel like you're giving up something.
Yeah. It's just a joke. It's just a cosmic joke. That's what Buddha said 2,500 years ago. When you throw it away, you realize it was just a farce, just a kind of a source of oppression that you never needed in the first place.
Yeah. We do go through the definition of a worthless or inferior person and the rebuttals.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll actually give them an example of one evening I was working in the ER doing psych evals, and I was called in to see this man who all I knew about him was his attorney wanted him to be seen. And he wouldn't tell the physicians or the nurses why he was there. And at that time, I was working for Shepherd Pratt.
I remember Shepherd Pratt. I gave a talk there once.
Yep.
And what is that for people who don't live in Maryland?
Shepherd Pratt is a hospital that's been around for, 100 years. At one time, it used to be a farm where patients lived. And they've certainly evolved over the many decades, but it is the place. In fact, a lot of celebrities will go there.
Yeah, it's a mental facility, mental hospital, right?
They have a huge inpatient and outpatient program.
It's prestigious, right, in Maryland?
Oh, it is. It is the place to go. People will fly in from all over the world to go to Shepherd Pratt.
Oh, no kidding.
Yes, it is quite the place. So I went in to see this man, and I walked into the room, and he said, I'm going to tell you something, but you can't tell anybody else. And I said, what's that? And he said, I just killed my mother and my stepfather because they were trying to poison me with those pills. And when that nurse took my blood, I thought about stabbing her with that needle. And he was very psychotic. And I went down and I got the nurse and told the doctor what was going on. And they had no idea. And I'm like, oh, my God, I was in there by myself with this man. And he's very paranoid. He's hallucinating. But I bring this up to my group. I'll say, so is he a worthless person? He killed 2 people hideous the way he did it. Just to try to give them, an extreme example, if you will, of getting them to really think about this whole idea of who's worthless and who's not, and how do we define this? What's the criteria? Or how about the dentist who ran over her husband multiple times in the parking lot at the hotel where he was having an affair? Is she a worthless person? How do we, make these distinctions? And so I think giving some examples makes it more interesting for people, and they
much more interesting. But tell us the answer.
What do you think?
What do people say? Are they worthless, or what do they say?
No, they do let them off the hook. With the example of the patient I saw in the ER, it was he was mentally ill.
Yeah, I see.
And the woman who ran over her husband, she only did that because she snapped.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Prior to that, she was this very, very worthwhile person, and just her doing this put her in the worthless category.
If you Google for the Jeffrey Dahmer interview, he was that serial killer, and there's an interview on TV with him and his father after he was arrested, and it's so moving. He's one of the most appealing persons I've ever seen in my whole life. It seems weird. You're grimacing, Rhonda. Go look at the interview.
Okay.
He'll steal your heart away. Really, he was totally self-effacing, and he wasn't defensive, and he just said he had these fantasies from the time he was a little boy, and and he started acting on them, and there was no excuse for what he did, but he had these certain kind of fantasies, and then his father, who was with him in the interview, said, "Well, I've never told anyone this, son, but I had the exact same fantasies when I was a little boy and growing up, but I just never acted on them." Mm-hmm. And it's so moving. It just speaks to what you're saying about this, making judgments that people are, worthless
or worthwhile.
Yeah, worthless or worthwhile.
So I'm feeling a little anxious because we've been talking for an hour, and it's usually the time when we end our podcasts.
Oh my gosh!
And we have
so much more to tell you.
There is, but I think it would be really super fun. People will have to get the book to read about the last 2 weeks, maybe, or we might be able to go over. What do you think, David?
It's up to you. It's up to you, folks.
Well, that's okay. Well,
we can just finish up. Let's just summarize the end, because it's just so fascinating, and I'm just blown away by what you're teaching us, Dawn. And I have a quick question for you, Dawn. I mean, if some of our readers, listeners, wanted to contact you and join your groups, could they do that, or would you want that, or?
They could, although I'm only licensed in Maryland. I think if I were to take this out of the medical model insurance world as an educational group, then I could, I could expand it.
It's and actually to think about. If you were interested in doing that, I'd certainly give you support and through the podcast in every way I can, and send people to you, because I think what you're doing is just fantastic. Thank you.
Well, I really enjoy doing it. And that's the thing. You have to enjoy your work. It has to be fun.
Yeah.
And patients, let me tell you, you can't fake them out. You cannot go through the motions, because they will figure it out quick.
Yeah.
Dawn, why don't let's read. Can you read a couple of the great endorsements that you started off by showing us?
Absolutely.
And some of the things that your patients have said to you at the end of their group.
So one person said, "I found this course to be a great starting point for someone who is depressed or anxious. It really brings clarity to issues we feel but don't always know how to put into words or what to do to challenge our own thinking and change our behavior. This class brings hope."
Nice.
I've learned that people really do care. I just have to believe that I'm worthwhile. I learned that I can be helped. I've learned so many valuable things. I don't think I will ever forget my mirror moment.
Oh, wow.
This class was the best thing I've ever attended. I've been starving for this type of thing since my first depression in 1994. Dawn is the best.
Wow.
Everyone has imperfections.
Read that again, because I'm copying these down.
Oh, well, I can send it to you.
Yeah, but read it again. I want to hear it again. It's so beautiful. The last one I got was the mirror moment.
Yes.
And if you ever write a book, you could entitle it The Mirror Moment.
I really could. Let me tell you, I could tell you some stories about the mirror. This class was the best thing I've ever attended. I've been starving for this type of thing since my first depression in 1994.
Wow.
Dawn is the best. Another one, everyone has imperfections. It's okay to be me. Another person said, my test scores improved drastically. And while they are nowhere near optimal compared to the first week, this class has helped me improve tremendously. Plus, I'm armed with the tools that I can use on my own. Another person said, I wish the whole world were required to take this workbook home and read it.
Wow.
I do too. And yes, to
Me
buy
too.
my workbook and read it, the whole world.
And do the work within it.
That's what she said. Another person said, this course and Dawn were answers to prayer.
Oh, wow.
I've learned how our thinking affects every area of our lives. I like the accountability, which helped push me to do the exercises, which in turn helped me a great deal.
I just had a visitation from the Holy Spirit, from God. And God said, you have to stop now.
No, I can't stop. That's the thing. I have to keep doing it.
Absolutely. Well, it's so exciting because, it's a Buddhist thing. We're all one. And you can't help someone else without helping yourself at the same time. If you give others the gift of joy, you give yourself the gift of joy.
Oh, absolutely. I get so much back from doing this.
Dawn, thank you so much for coming on to our podcast and talking to us about the work that you're doing with the groups and the classes that you're running, based on David's book, 10 Days to Self-Esteem. We often don't get a chance to talk about that.
Yeah.
It's so exciting to hear how you're implementing it and the huge impact you're making.
Thank you so much. I'm filled with admiration and gratitude. And then we'll put in the show notes where people can, contact you if they want to learn more or whatever. But can you just give your email should we just verbalize your email address in case someone wants to contact you to learn more or whatever? Because everyone doesn't read the show notes.
Sure. It's DAO at TCC, the number 4, change.com.
Let me see if I got DOA. Is that correct?
DAO.
Okay, DAO at PCC number 4 change.com.
T as in Tom.
Oh, TCC
TCC for change.
TCC number 4 change.com. Okay, one more time. And you can write if you'd like to contact Dawn and learn more about her totally brilliant and life-changing work. You go to DAO at T as in Tom, CC number 4, change, CHANGE.com.
Right, which is short for the Counseling Center for Change.
Oh, okay, cool.
And that's what I own.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. And it's been too long, so maybe we'll be in better touch and do some kind of a progress report or get you. I'll have to make sure my colleague, Jeremy Carmel, who's helping me create this app, I'll make sure he listens to this podcast because, and Alex too, I think, will be fascinated to hear about the simplicity, the beauty and the power and the soul of the work that you've been doing.
Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Burns, for giving me the content.
Yep.
I never imagined the journey that this would take me on and all the people that I would be able to help by using your work. So I thank you.
Yeah. And if any of you are listening want to start a group like this, they can be started by lay leaders There's a workbook for the people in your groups. There's an instruction manual for the leaders. And it would just be my dream that people all over would have the chance to be exposed to this material. One last question. Is it too old for high school students?
No, it's
Okay.
not. It's
Yeah.
definitely not. They can get this.
Yeah. Perfect.
And I would like to put out a challenge to my colleagues and my peers that are also in private practice to just take a chance and do it. Just try this, because this is something so powerful that we can offer patients, and it's life-changing. And if anyone wants to learn how to do it and they want to shadow me, contact me.
Fantastic.
I'm happy to do that.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Rhonda.
Thank
you
you.
all for listening. I hope you loved today's podcast. To me, it was like music, beautiful music.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
This has been another episode of the Feeling Good podcast. For more information, visit Dr. Burns' website at feelinggood.com, where you will find the show notes under the podcast page. You will also find archives of previous episodes and many resources for therapists and non-therapists. We welcome your comments and questions. If you want to support the show, please share the podcast with people who might benefit from it. You could also go to iTunes and leave a 5-star rating. I am your host, Rhonda Borowski, the director of the Feeling Great Therapy Center. We hope you enjoyed this episode. I invite you to join us next time for another episode of the Feeling Good podcast.